Joining me now, Sky News political contributor Chris Uhlmann. Chris, we'll start with the big global news of today. Australia joining, of course, Canada, the UK and others to formally recognise Palestinian. This has caused a lot of angst with top Republicans, warning Anthony Albanese that recognising Palestine risks punitive measures against Australia. Chris, we're under pressure on so many fronts, this alliance, and we'll get to the whole meeting of will there or won't there be a meeting between our Prime Minister and the President, but I'm sure you heard my views at the top of the show. This only rewards the terrorists. I know we knew this was coming, but I am just very, very sad to see this day today.
Yeah, well, Anthony Albanese, Peter, talked about sending a signal. Let's not forget that the primary signal that's being sent by the Prime Ministers of Canada, the United Kingdom and Australia is to a domestic political audience, and a very particular one, in fact, their political parties. There'd be a revolution inside the Labor Party's caucus in Australia and certainly in the United Kingdom if they had not gone down this path. So that's why the signal's being sent. It's a political gesture. It will shift nothing on the ground. But what it is being seen as by Hamas is a political victory, and that tells you something that you need to know about the kind of people that we are dealing with, and that is they were prepared to forfeit the lives of everyone in Gaza to achieve the end of discrediting the state of Israel. And on that front, they have been very successful. So this is what victory looks like to Hamas. I would say this, though. Benjamin Netanyahu needed to take this into account in his response in Gaza. We need to know what victory looks like to Benjamin Netanyahu and when he will make an end to the war in Gaza and hopefully begin to build some bridges to the rest of the world.
Let's have a look at this grab from the Prime Minister today about his prohibition, his precondition, he says, in the recognition of Palestine, that Hamas can take no future role in Gaza or a Palestinian state. Have a listen.
Now, well, they're all determined. Those further steps are determined on the moves going forward, including the commitments that have been given by the Palestinian Authority that Hamas play no role.
OK, so he bumbles his way through it today, but how does he stop Hamas having a role? The people voted for Hamas last time. Even if the entity is not called Hamas on the ballot paper, it'll have the same Islamist sentiment. This is generational hatred being bred in the West Bank and in Gaza. You know that. I've been to the West Bank. I know exactly what it's like. I went to meet officials in the West Bank, I might add, Palestinian officials, and I had to walk past this huge monument bearing the names of people that had blown themselves up in the name of Islam, and they were commemorated and the families were given pensions. Now, how on earth is Albanese going to be able to stop them taking control now they've got this UN commitment, this global commitment to a Palestinian state?
Well, as you say, Peter, the last time that there was an election there, what we saw was Hamas won. It beat the Palestinian Authority, so that the Australian government and the British government, the Canadian government and 140 other governments can say that they want to deal with the Palestinian Authority, but if it's not delivered to them in the shape of an election by the people of Palestine, then they're not going to get it. So the thing begins to fall apart as soon as you begin to question what might happen in that part of the world. Look, the whole of the Middle East is a never-ending tragedy to me. I am a lifelong supporter of the State of Israel. I will remain committed to the State of Israel. But I do think that one of the things that we need to see now from Israel is where do we go to from here? How do we end this war? How do we begin to try and rebuild some of the bridges that have been burned?
Well, we release the hostages, Chris. I mean, that has to be a precondition,
yeah.
And that has been walked away from.
Well, there's no intention, as you know, Peter. They've said it. They're never going to release those hostages. That was the only bargaining chip that they had. So they will die along with a whole lot more Gazans because of this. And Hamas gets precisely the kind of world that it wants. But if the Australian government believes that it can influence that world in any way, shape or form, then it's not been watching the way that the world actually works.
All right, well, this much anticipated meeting, we know that our Prime Minister doesn't want a showdown in the Oval Office. Our Prime Minister can fly all around the world, but he's not going to Washington for a sit down with the President. The best they can hope for is something around the margins. of the UN General Assembly in New York this week. I read a bit of light, a shadow that there might be a meeting in comments he made to Andrew Clennell. Have a listen.
Are you definitely not having a formal bilat with Donald Trump this week?
No, well, we'll wait and see, but I won't be preempting those issues. We, of course, I look forward to meeting with President Trump at some stage. We've had 4 constructive discussions. I'll see him tomorrow night at the function that he's hosting.
I look at that and I think we look like a third-rate bit player, Chinese lackey, if I'm kind. I mean, the idea that we cannot have a meeting after all this time with our biggest ally because our guy has no weight in the room, I'm just ashamed, Chris.
Yeah, I think one of the issues here too is do not forget that the Labor government, particularly Anthony Albanese, made much during the federal election campaign of essentially trying to tie the coalition to a Donald Trump America. That wasn't lost on the Americans, and then during his curtain lecture he did it again, essentially, when he was dog whistling the fact that of the 2 big presidents that he has to deal with, the one from China and the one from the United States, it was the one from the United States which appeared to bother him most. Now, none of that will have been lost on the White House, and that's why we find ourselves partly in the predicament that we're in. But again, I would add this as well. Donald Trump is a particularly mercurial character, so dealing with him is going to never be easy at the best of times. You have to take that into account, particularly when we depend so heavily on the United States for our own defence.
Chris, we knew this going in, right? We saw a dress rehearsal of what he'd be like as president the last time he was in the job. We knew not to poke the bear. We knew to treat him with respect in the time he was out of office, because there was every indication he was going to run again. Our Prime Minister knew all of this. He knew he was ahead in the polls, and he still went after Donald Trump in the election campaign to score points off Peter Dutton. And now we reap what we sow.
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem that we've got is that we are, as I've just said, really deeply dependent on the United States for our immediate defence. And by immediate defence, I mean in the next few years. Yes, there is some build-up of the Australian Defence Force, but nowhere near what we need. And our actual defence will come from the United States by the way of the fact that we're going to have ever larger rotations of troops and ships through Australia. So we are defiant in word, it seems to me, but absolutely dependent indeed. And the Australian government needs to get its head around that.
All right, let's go into the big announcement on Thursday. You and I have talked a long time and speculated about what those targets for 2035 might be. That the mothership has landed. They're a shocker. No detail though in terms of financials. We'll get into the crab walk away from power price relief for households in a moment. But your top line view, Chris, what did you think of Thursday's 2035 announcement?
Well, it's a dangerous delusion, and I can put aside to a certain extent a political party holding dangerous delusions, but this is the thing that deeply disturbs me, Peter, is there is an institutional betrayal of the Australian people by almost all of the agencies of state. Now, why do I say that? Because I've gone through and I have read the reports that they produced to try and drive us towards the position that the government adopted in the end, starting with the apparent science, the risk assessment. They deliberately left out and distorted information about heat-related deaths and a whole lot of other things to paint an apocalyptic picture of the future, which simply doesn't stand up under any kind of scrutiny. And Australia's Treasury, that once hallowed institution, you know what it did? When it went around modelling the emissions reductions of countries, what did it put in for the United States? The numbers from 2023. Well, what's happened since then? Donald Trump's been elected president and the entire world has shifted on its axis because of that. They're no longer in the Paris Agreement. So how can we have any confidence at all in any numbers that are churned out the other end when these things are clearly polemics?
Let's go to this crab walk I mentioned then about power price relief from Chris Bowen. Have a listen.
So we're already starting to see early signs of that having an impact, but we'll see more with the next default market offer. We'll see that play out.
We'll see the prices come down?
Well, we'll see it play out over coming years.
He's also refused to commit to any sort of new renewable energy target by 2035. We know it's 82% of the power mix by 2030. Nothing to say yet on 2035. Today he also said, I'm open to spending more, so the chequebook is still out for a lot of these foreign renewable firms. But what do you make of the fact that We never saw the $275 per annum that he promised. And now the relief that was in the budget potentially there on Thursday, that 13% drop, that's gone already.
Well, Chris Bowen has just underlined the fact, Peter, that he has no confidence in the modelling that's put out by his agencies either. And in this case, the Australian Energy Market Commission, again, supposed to be looking after our interests, it says that there'll be Nevada in a few years' time with $1,000 a year off every single bill. But what doesn't it say? Well, it didn't use in any of its modelling the fact that you have to pay tens of thousands of dollars in upfront costs to electrify. It didn't say anything about that. On the same page as it said that there would be $1,000 drop in electricity prices, it said there was a possibility it might go up by $100. And by the way, it points out the fact that we are now going into a divided Australia. There will be the energy haves, the people who have EVs, batteries, solar panels, and the energy have-nots. And they will include the poorest people in Australia, the people who rent, the people who are in apartments, the people who cannot afford this transition. A big part of the energy transition, by the way, that the government has us on track for is you spending, Australian households spending, lots and lots of money in order to deliver your own electricity and to write off the capital cost and then say you've now got cheap power. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up.
I'll tell you what, my audience love you on the program, Chris, but if they were smart, if Labor was smart, if Australia was smart, they'd sack McKean and put you in the top job there and get some reality into some of these forecasts. But I don't reckon that's going to happen in a quick time anyway. Thank you for tonight.